Hey there everyone, this is Samuel Johnson and welcome back to the Spider-Verse Retrospectives, and today we'll be concluding our discussion on the Spider-Verse storyline as we take a look at The Amazing Spider-Man Volume 3, number 15, and, well, previously on Spider-Verse, the Spider Army won. They finally brought the fight straight to Loom World, and put simply, they whooped the Inheritors' asses. They called in all the reinforcements, they had a giant robot, they stopped the ritual, they sent him away, and by the end of it all, they managed to get Card on their side because he didn't like his family in the first place, and they managed to trap the Inheritors on Earth 3145, the perfect prison because it's an irradiated world, and, well, there's not a lot of places they can go on that world, save for maybe a bunker they can all stockpile in. So, yeah, everything's going good, and since the bad guys have been beaten, there's only one thing left to do. Well, send everyone home, which is where issue 15 begins, as, well, we see the Spider Army pretty much just going its separate ways. All the various Spider-Men and women of the multiverse just going back to their universes and all getting their farewells. We got, the first one we see off is, well, Mayday Parker, as she and Peter end up talking, and she apologizes for how she's been acting throughout the story, about how how she yelled at all the Spider-Men, claimed that they're all fakes, that Peter wasn't her father, blah, 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 blah. But Peter assures her that she's fine. No one's lost. If anyone, basically, out of all the Spideys, no one's lost more than she has. Well, maybe some have, but bottom line, he's assuring her that she's valid. It's fine. There's no hard feelings. And, well, she should just head home. Her brother's probably waiting for her. And so, Mayday jumps through the portal back to her universe, which I'm just going to say right now, her world's called the MC2 universe because the comic imprint that she was a part of was called Marvel Comics 2, MC2. So I'm going to refer to her, the universe, as the MC2 universe from now on. But bottom line, she goes back to her universe, and she immediately wonders where her brother is, as she ends up right in front of her, the smoldering remains of her house, only for Uncle Ben to pop up behind her and let her know that her brother's safe. And so she wants to know what's going on, and so he says, well, the neighbors have him. For whatever reason, they just could not let the little scamp go. Before he calls out to the neighbors and say, hey everyone, Mayday's home. And sure enough, it turns out that there are people there waiting for Mayday. But as when the door opens, we see this world's Mary Jane and her boyfriend and Mayday's boyfriend Wes. Yep, it turns out they survived. Mary Jane managed to pull Wes out of the house before it collapsed in on itself, and so they actually survived. Though sadly, Peter still bit the dust because, again, he got his life force sucked out of him by Deimos. But bottom line, Mayday's just happy that they're alive. She thinks it's a miracle. Can't express how happy she is. But Mary Jane is just, and while she's distraught that her dad is still not back, well, Mary Jane assures them that Mayday's alive, Mary Jane's alive, and she has her brother, and he gave his life to protect them, and all he would want them to do is continue living their lives, which is a nice sentiment. But Mary Jane does mention that there was something that did survive the fire that she thinks that Mayday should have. As such, she asks Uncle Ben to hold Benji, and, well, as he takes the kid, Uncle Ben has one little request to make. Because, well, his world's a giant irradiated cesspool, and, well, there's really nothing left for him to go back to. And so he just kind of says, yeah, I think maybe I could end up staying here, and maybe I can be something that most other Uncle Bens aren't. A grandfather. And Mayday's happy to have him, which I think is sweet and nice, and a nice little kind of turnaround from what happens in the tie-ins, which we'll get to when we get to it. The point is, after Mayday says Uncle Ben can stay, she follows her mother back to an old closet, and it turns out that what would survive the fire was Peter's old Spider-Man costume, with Mary Jane saying that he would want Mayday to have it. And so that little section ends with Mayday having a little inner monologue saying that she's Mayday Parker, her story has begun anew, that she's no longer a girl, that from this day forward, she is Spider-Woman. And and essentially her role as Spider-Woman is exactly the same as Spider-Girl. So, either way, it's a nice little finale. It's a nice little cap-off for her storyline. Essentially just kind of nice seeing her have a happy ending. That, while her father is gone, she still has a family, she still has loved ones, her brother is safe, and she still has a life, and essentially now has new vigor, now that she has this thing left from her father. So, it's nice. I like it. It's sweet. But in the meantime, back on Loom World with the other Spideys, the rest of them all say their goodbyes as well. With Spider-Ham saying goodbye, hold on one sec. Sorry, I was just checking something. But yeah, pretty much Spider-Ham goes on his way. Spider-Man India says this was a great adventure. 60 Spider-Man bids his farewells, and even the Drake Bell Spidey thanks Miles for the adventure and says, hey, next time we do this, we should do this in my dimension, which is supposed to be a callback to the fact that the Ultimate Spider-Man cartoon actually did do their own version of Spider-Verse, which I saw. It's alright. But ultimately, Miles and Ultimate just have to go back to their universe, and while Miles is disappointed that he and Peter couldn't hang out as much as he would have liked, Peter assures him that he thinks they'll see each other again. More than they realize, but we'll get to that when we get to that. And so, as such, one of the last Spideys that gets sent through is Hobby Brown, with Billy telling him, oh, it's fine, I'm sorry for the inconvenience, but Hobby also warns Billy to keep an eye on Karn, as, yeah, well, he may be on their side now, he still killed a lot of Spider-Men before he turned, and he's still an inheritor. So basically he just tells him to kind of sleep with one eye open around him because, well, he might end up turning on him again one day. But either way, Hobby goes back to his universe, and so all that's left of the Spideys are the Spider people of Earth 616, Spider-Gwen, and Spider-Man 2099, as they all have to go back to their respective worlds. And so, while Peter is glad that they'll probably be able to send Miguel back to his proper time once and for all, well, it's at that moment that all of their spider senses just go nuts. And I'm not talking about, like, just a few of them, no. All remaining Spider-Men have their spider senses just go off. And the thing is, as I have kind of mentioned before, at least a couple of the Spideys here don't actually have spider sense. So for them to also be feeling this thing as well, it's gotta be something big, which even Karn immediately realizes, as well at first they think this is Karn's doing, he says, no, it's not me. For all of you to be feeling it like this, something must be going on with the Great Web. Someone's tampering with it. And it's at this point when Peter realizes something. They're short one Spider-Man. And sure enough, back with the Great Web, we see the Superior Spider-Man holding the ceremonial knife that Mullen was using and cutting the Great Web. As such, the remaining Spideys run up and pretty much tell him, what the hell are you doing? That's the fabric of reality. That you can't mess with that. But at this point, Otto just drops all pretenses and lets them know that he knows that they know that he's really Otto Octavius, and that at some point in his future, he's gonna bite it, and Peter's gonna come back, and he pretty much is just saying, fuck that. He doesn't want to die. He's this world's greatest hero. He says screw you to fate. No one decides what he does but himself, and so he continues just cutting through the web, which even causes some repercussions as back on the main Marvel Universe, Madam Web, who was a former Spider-Woman, I'll get to her later, trust me, wakes up as apparently she was in a coma, which apparently she fell into in the Scarlet Spider books. We'll get to that, but actually, we won't get to that. But either way, as apparently, yeah, cutting through the Great Web is starting to have an effect, as when she wakes up, she screams about it and how she sees nothing, and even Karn admits that this is a bad thing, that since this is the foundation of all of the fabric of the multiverse, you don't mess with it. As pretty much as we saw back in the flashback storyline, just the Master Weaver pulling at a few threads caused a few pieces of his old lair to start falling apart. He managed to disassemble Karn's mom by just snipping a thread. So now that Otto is messing with this thing and cutting it up like it's string, it's very bad. It's very bad, and Karn says they need to act quickly. As such, Peter says that he and the other Spideys of Earth 616 will go deal with Otto, but in the meantime, he tells Miguel and Gwen to just get out of here, that he wants them to get back to their proper worlds. This is probably Miguel's only chance to get back to his proper time, and while Gwen and Miguel aren't exactly happy to just leave them to deal with Otto, well, at this point, they really have no choice. They need to get home, and with the web being cut apart, they're losing portals one by one. So, as such, they manage to open portals, and Miguel assures Gwen that everything will be fine. He was there when the Superior Spider-Man fell, so the good guys won, everything worked out, which Gwen is happy to hear, though, and so Miguel and Gwen go off into the portals back to their proper places. Well, Gwen more than Miguel, but that's in Miguel's solo series, which I'm not going to be talking about. Either way, back with the remaining Spideys of Earth 616 and Spider UK, they immediately just climb up to the pillars to the Great Web and start duking it out with Otto. And while Peter is boasting a good fight, well, even he's still not at his best, as he's still recovering from all the life force that Moreland drained out of him. So he's still not doing well. Pretty much, yeah, like I said, the remaining Spideys just start dog piling on top of Otto, and he just starts batting them aside, knocking them off, calling them hypocrites, fools. Why would they want to stop him? If this web is supposed to be some predetermined map of their lives, then cunning it will mean they have free will and all that jazz. But pretty much, yeah, they're not listening to him, and even at this point trying to get the knife away from him. And yeah, at this point he's starting to get even more physical, as he's even starting to brandish the knife at all of them, and even almost attacks Anya Corazon. However, the thing is, as I mentioned, this is a ceremonial knife. It's not just random switchblade that Moreland had. It's a special knife. And as Otto is duking it out, Anya manages to get in close and grab the arm holding the knife. And it turns out that on the back of the knife is some more writing, kind of similar to the scrolls. And since, as we established, Anya can read that thing, she's able to understand what the knife says. And the knife tells that basically, no matter what happens, at the center of the Web of Life and Destiny, there's always going to be a Master Weaver. And which pretty much just means that, yeah, one Weaver can die, but the role can be replaced. And basically, one particular Spidey that hears this, in this case, Silk, believes that it might be referring to her, as during the ritual, Moreland mentioned how she was supposed to be the spider at the center of the web, which I didn't talk about because I didn't feel it was important at the time. But ultimately, Silk thinks that this must be what she was made for, that she's supposed to take on the role of the Master Weaver, that she's going to be the one that now spins Web of Life and Destiny, as they think that if they have a Master Weaver, they can repair the web. But in the midst of the battle, still things are going haywire. In the midst of the battle, things are going haywire, and while Otto does turn the tide of battle and almost stabs Anya through, Jessica Drew and Peter come in and manage to kick Otto in the face and make him drop the knife, with Anya shooting a web line and grabbing it. However, she's able to read the other side of the knife, and she then tells Cindy to not do it, because it turns out the role of the Master Weaver is a lifetime sentence, and basically, if you take the role, the only way you can get out of it is if you die. And considering that Cindy spent most of her life living in a bunker, yeah, it might not be within her best interest to want to take up this mantle, as she'll just be stuck with basically just tending to this giant web for the rest of her days. However, as such, the remaining Spideys even tell her think hard on this, with even Karn saying, "Look, I was brandished in exile and was cursed to living inside this, so I know what it's like to be trapped like that. So think long and hard before you make this decision." And ultimately, Cindy does decide that she does want to take the role, but when she unmasks the Master Weaver, well, she's a little confused, as under the mask, he's just a random guy, which, yeah, that's the thing I forgot to mention about the Master Weaver. He did typically wear a mask, as like I said, his main body was that he was wearing like this big giant mechanized spider thing with a mask, and that stayed true even under his imprisonment under the Inheritors. But pretty much the instant that Cindy removes the mask, she's like, well, this is just a random guy. I thought it'd be someone we know, but I don't know this guy. But the instant Karn sees the Master Weaver without his mask, he's like, I know who that is. Before we hear a hiss, as he grabs his helmet and removes it. Yep, it turns out the Master Weaver's a dead ringer for him. An older version of him, but it is him. With everyone else going like, what the hell? How can you be in two places at once? And pretty much that Karn says that time is not as stable here, as showcased with the Amazing and Superior Spider-Man existing in the same place despite them being from two separate points in time. But ultimately, he thinks this is his destiny, which is even further verified as he takes his two-pronged spear and it actually inserts it into a little keyhole on the Master Weaver's giant legs, which, yeah, it fits for one, and which, yeah, even he is realized it must be destiny, because he forged his weapon when he was a kid, before the Inheritors found the Master Weaver. So, yeah, he realizes that this can't be a coincidence. And sure enough, once the mechanism releases, you can see the Master Weaver's actual legs are a dead ringer for Karn's actual pants. And so, yeah, at this point, and as such, Karn realizes, yeah, this is his burden to bear. And while the Spideys think that he shouldn't be able to take it, he's not really a spider totem, he says he's consumed enough spider totems that their essence flows through him. And he thinks, even at the end of the day, he says maybe this is the best way he can make penance. As he takes the Master Weaver's mask and pulls it on himself before climbing into his legs. In the meantime, back with the superior Spider-Man, he's ultimately managed to knock aside Jessica Drew, and so now finally the last remaining Spider-Man that's facing him on the web is the Amazing Spider-Man, with Otto pretty much proclaiming, "Now this is it, Parker, just you and me. It's time we see who's the real hero, or who's the better hero." With Peter telling him, "Yeah, no contest here. A real hero wouldn't have threatened Anya like that. A real hero wouldn't be threatening the lives of everyone else just to save their own hides. One day you will understand that. The day you give up that body and sacrifice everything. The day you acknowledge that I am the superior Spider-Man." And with that, Peter just flies at him and delivers a smack right to Otto's face. Which eventually ends in just him giving a beat down to Otto, something fierce, until Otto is finally just on the ground saying, "Fine, I yield, I give up, just stop. But this also might be a ruse for Otto, as once he's on the ground, he whispers to his little Anya hologram saying, "Okay, Anya, okay, Anna, like we planned." And so the hologram says, "Acknowledge, going into sleep mode for 100 days, which we'll kind of get back. We'll talk about that later. But in the meantime, yep, the superior Spider-Man is down, and now Karn is the new Master Weaver. And as such, with him now in control of the Web of Life and Destiny, he begins repairing each of the skeins on the web, but also even warns them that it will take time, and for a while the Spideys might have their connection to it somewhat limited, which won't affect their powers in any way, but it will kind of affect their ability to sense danger along its threads, i.e. their spider senses. But either way, yeah. That, as they say, is that. The Web of Life and Destiny has been... But yeah, that's as they say is that. The superior Spider-Man is down, they got a new Master Weaver, and so Karn starts spinning more of the web until he manages to open a portal back to Earth 616, back during the superior Spider-Man's time. And while he starts yelling out about how he'll never forget this, how he'll get his revenge and all that crap, Karn pretty much tells him, "You already got your revenge, you killed my older self, and if it makes you feel any better, crossing your own timeline like this should add to the brain, so you probably won't remember any of this." And so everything ends with Peter shoving Otto into a portal, and then we cut back to Earth 616, back during the Superior Spider-Man time, as we see Ground Zero Horizon Labs as the remaining scientists manage to coalesce all the chronal energy there, and sure enough, Otto emerges, still ranting about how they haven't seen the last of Dr. before he draws a blank and realizes, wait, what's going on again? Which, yeah, that's what goes back to Superior Spider-Man. But either way, yep, the day is seemingly saved, but there are still some complications. As Karn is getting ready to open portals for the remaining Spideys, he says he has some bad news for Spider UK. As when he tried locating a portal for his Earth, Earth 833, he found nothing. Just an empty void. Which even he has no idea what that is. But Billy does. So, remember back in the lead-in material when the Captain Britain Corps was looking into the incursions and how, as a result of those incursions, entire universes were being destroyed? Yeah, that was still going on even during Spider-Verse. And sadly for Billy, one of the Earths that was lost was his Earth, meaning that now everyone he's ever known and loved is dead, and he has no home to go back to. Something that shakes Billy to his core, especially since that was what the Captain Britain Corps was looking into, but he just abandoned the search, just abandoned it in favor of saving the other Spideys, which, while Peter does assure Billy that, if it makes any consolation, they wouldn't have survived this without him gathering them all together, it's still clear he's shaken. However, he decides to try and take this regret and instead try and turn it into resolve, as after all, a lot of worlds during this storyline lost their Spider-Man, and well, Billy's a Spider-Man without a home. So he thinks that maybe, just maybe, he can make things right if he can essentially fill in that role for them, as he decides that he's going to stay with Karn and essentially just go, if there's any world in the multiverse that needs a Spider-Man that doesn't have one, he'll go in and help them out. But he's not alone in that regard, as immediately Anya steps up and says she wants to help, as after all, her powers are connected to all this totem crap, and she thinks that maybe here she'll be useful. And while Jessica tries to talk her down, saying, "Come on, we need you back home," even Anya says, "Look, like Jess, come on. Every time I turn my back, there's like a new Spider Girl. I'll be fine." And so Jess reluctantly consigns to her fate and says, "Okay, fine." And so Karn is thankfully able to open a portal now to Earth 616 in the present day. And so Peter, Jessica, and Cindy all go through waving their goodbyes to Karn, Billy, and Anya. And so as they go, Anya and Billy say that they've got a lot of work ahead of them, but even Billy assures them that they've got plenty of amazing friends to help them out, which is supposed to help lead into the Spider-Verse tie into Secret Wars, but we'll get to that later. But either way, Karn tells the pair that he'll lead them to their rooms and tomorrow to begin their work. But unbeknownst to the trio, once they leave the Great Chamber, in the next panel we go back over to Kane's lifeless body, and as it lays limp in the web, we see a human hand burst out from what was left of his body, showcasing that yes, Kane is alive. So good on them for that. But either way, the story officially ends as Spider-Man, Spider-Woman, and Silk all arrive back on Earth 616, and all are just happy to be home. Cindy is immediately worried that she might have lost her job at the Fact Channel. Jessica says that she's got her own things to take care of, but Peter, well, he's the boss of his own company. He can make whatever excuse he wants for why he wasn't around. But Peter assures them that this whole thing has taught him about true responsibility. That he didn't, like, for the last 2 days, he's wondering if he's really cut out to be a leader. But you know what? He just led an army of alternate Spideys against a group of immortal vampires. He thinks he can do anything. And so he jumps off and swings through New York, thinking about how can he go back to dealing with the little things now that he's fought in a war. Only for him to hear a lady crying out for help as a man steals her purse, and him swinging in, knocking the guy out, and getting the purse back. Pretty much assuring himself that, yeah, for him, there are no little things, and ultimately, yeah, that's where the story ends, so. Alright, so my thoughts on the epilogue. I think it's fine. It really is just supposed to be a wrap-up for the entire Spider-Verse storyline. It's just a nice little way of sending everybody off and doing their own thing, and yeah, ultimately just an epilogue, so to speak. I suppose really I should just be talking about my thoughts on Spider-Verse as a whole. And put simply, I think it's really damn good. Okay, I'm not going to claim it's a perfect storyline. As I mentioned, there are some problems that I do have with it. For starters, like with many other big event storylines, I think it's annoying that in order to understand key parts of the story, you do need to have read the tie-ins. And like I said, this book not only has the main storyline, but it does contain all the tie-ins and does contain a chronological order. But imagine if you read this book raw, like you were picking up all the issues off of the stand. Like you pick up an issue of Amazing Spider-Man and learn, oh, there's this storyline featuring all these Spideys. I want to read it. And then as you read through it, you start learning that there's essentially supplemental material that you gotta read. It essentially means that there's more stuff that you gotta buy in order to understand the main story. And I don't like that. I don't like that at all. I'm not saying that the tie-ins are bad, but by that same token, it feels dumb that in order to understand the full story, you gotta have to read this extra stuff. It just annoys me and I don't care for it. On top of that, it's still a little complaint of mine. It still kind of gets me a little when I see the various Spider-Men be killed. And I understand the story has to have stakes, and you've got to establish that the Inheritors are some of the baddest motherfuckers in the multiverse that will require having all these Spideys in the same room together. Because after all, you have to have a threat that is so large that it requires an entire army of Spider-Men to deal with it. And in that sense, we do see that with the Inheritors. They are exceedingly powerful. They are exceedingly strong. And basically, if even one Spider-Man tries going up against them, it is not a fair fight. But by that same token, it does annoy me that essentially quite a few Spider-Men had to be thrown to the pyres as sacrificial lambs. Now, admittedly, some of those Spideys were created for Spider-Verse, and thus some of them were essentially created to die, like when Edge of Spider-Verse with Aaron Ankman and Patton Parnell. Those were two Spideys who were created for the event, and to my knowledge, they never show up again afterwards, so it's clear that they do not come back, which... yeah, I don't really care for Patton Parnell. Screw that guy. He was a monster. He was a monster even before he got his spider powers. But even Aaron Ankman, I think, could have had more time to him. Which, okay, that's a little minor complaint. Could have had more time with Aaron. I still find issue 3 to be the weakest of Edge of Spider-Verse. But that's another thing altogether. I'm not going to get into. I already got into it in the vlog. My point is this: it doesn't bother me as much with them, unless, of course, with Aaron, the story could have used more time with them. But when you have Spider-Men who are pre-established and have their own continuities and come from stories that your readers are more than likely going to be familiar with going into the story, well, going in and seeing those Spider-Men that they probably have emotional investment in suddenly get offed for the sake of showcasing just how strong and badass these new villains are, it can get to you. You saw my rant when I talked about the Amazing Spider-Man, when I talked about issue 9 of Amazing Spider-Man, and how it bugged me how the bullet point Spider-Man was thrown to the pyre, especially since even in his own universe he got the shaft. It annoys me that you have these pre-established Spider-Men and then just bring them into the story just to kill them off. Now, for some Spideys, I don't feel as bad about. Like, for example, some of the Spideys that we see in the story that do get killed are Spideys that essentially were there, that even in their own stories weren't very around. Like, going back to Captain Spider, while I do like the idea of Flash Thompson being Spider-Man is a cool idea and even has been done 3 times in the pages of What If to varying degrees. Well, in the initial Captain Spider story, well, the gimmick was that he died, so you can easily say this is just an alternate Captain Spider, so not really that much of a loss when that guy's already dead. But then when you have other Spider-Men who do have their own compelling stories, like with Spider Knight or well, maybe not Spider Monkey, but Spider Knight or the Betty Brant Spider Girl who did not die in her storyline, it can get to you. It can annoy you. And seeing these Spideys just get essentially thrown to the wolves and said, okay, you're just here to die, it's annoying, and it really does not feel satisfying in that regard, as they don't really feel like they go out heroically. They feel like it just feels like they're curb stomped, so to speak. Hell, let's go back to Assassin Spider-Man. Like I mentioned, that was this version of Spider-Man that I had read prior to reading Spider-Verse. I didn't even, and he had his own continuity. Yeah, he was only in one issue of What If, but then when he was introduced for Spider-Verse, he had an entire backup story in an issue of Superior Spider-Man. We saw how he got pulled in, his Wolverine and Alex duking it out with Karn, which, by the way, Alex's sister is named Charlie. I'm sorry I forgot her name, but bottom line, that's not important. But yeah, we saw him have an introduction story, and then in the Superior Spider-Man issues, it made it look like his involvement was going to be a bigger thing, as Otto, him, and Ashley all were talking about how they might have to duke it out with the other Spideys just to kill the Inheritors. But then, like I said, that goes nowhere in the story. And Assassin Spider-Man, he's just unceremoniously killed off when the Spider Army comes to recruit Otto and his group. It's not even a big thing. He doesn't go out guns blazing. It's just, he gets killed. It's stupid. And it's a similar case with other Spideys. They don't go out as heroes. They don't go out as true Spider-Man fighting the good fight. They go out as cannon fodder. And I feel like that's a little disrespectful if you enjoyed those stories. While it is cool to still see them, and while it is cool to see them referenced, especially in regards to some of the Spideys that are from TV shows, at the same time, if you're a fan of those comics or shows, well, guess what? You know that Spider-Man that you enjoyed following the adventures of for so long? Well, they're dead now! Hope you liked that! It can get to me. And I know for a fact that what happened with the Spider-Man from Spider-Man and His Amazing Friends, that got to more people too. I have seen that panel showcased, and nobody has said any good things about that sequence. Just the image of Spider-Man, Iceman, and Firestar all just brutally murdered in what's left of their base, with their dog just standing over their bodies and howling in mourning. That's horrifying, and I understand that was the point. But at the same time, it feels like a big F you if you were a fan of that show. Follow that Spider-Man through his exploits. Now to learn that he's just unceremoniously killed off by this big bad bitch Morlun, yeah, at that point it can kind of get to you. And that's a problem with Spider-Verse. Again, there's still plenty of cool there, but it just feels dumb just to unceremoniously kill them off like that. And then which brings me to the next problem with the story. The Inheritors. While I'll get to what I like about them later and why I don't hate them as much as other people, but put simply, as villains, they don't feel like they should be in the same league as Spider-Man, because throughout the story they're showcased to just be exceedingly powerful. Now, while I will still jump to the defense of Spider-Verse and say that this overwhelming power is a good reason to showcase why the various Spideys of the multiverse need to work together to stop them, by that same token, when you see just how much they can actually take, even when a bunch of Spideys gang up on them, it can make them feel very OP. Even they can be shot by bullets, they can be hit with electricity, they can be thrown into an exploding thing, and you can even fucking kill them, but they still come back. They just keep coming. They just feel like, it feels aggravating, it feels angry, and it feels like these are guys who are essentially way out of Spider-Man's league, and it feels like they should be less his villains and maybe some other big-time villain, or some other big-time superheroes villains, but instead they're Spideys, which, again, it does constitute bringing all the Spideys together for it. It just feels like they don't belong in the Spider-Man storyline, is what I'm saying. But with that being said, I don't hate them. Yeah, while I understand why other people would have complaints about them, there are things about the Inheritors that do still make me like them. For starters, I like their varying demeanors. And the thing is, while the Inheritors are meant to be this powerful, at home, they're a family. They bicker, they get on each other's nerves, they agree with each other, they act cordial and then talk smack behind each other's backs. They have little competitions, they care about one another. And quite frankly, I find that interesting. Each of the Inheritors are not just the carbon copies of one another. They're not just, and not all of them are just hunt the Spider-Man because secure our reign. No, they all have reasons for why they do what they do, why they engage in the hunt like they do. Going up, like I mentioned, the scene with at the dinner table when Solus asked his children how they all saw the Great Web was a great way to showcase each of their characters and what they all strove for in life. Morlun, as the Golden Child, put himself at the top of everything, claiming that he was being somewhat arrogant about it, but taking his job genuinely seriously. He felt that the Web of Life and Destiny and their hunt across the multiverse for the various spider totems was sacred, was something their family had to do, and thus took it seriously, which also showcased why he hated Peter as much, that he was one of the few Spideys in the multiverse who actually fought him and beat him, which would get to him something fierce. And of course, again, the trauma with being killed by the other, that's gonna scar someone for life. But my point is this. At the very least, it showcases more of his character and does a good job at it. And likewise, each of the other Inheritors have very distinct characterizations for them and make them distinct. Going with Genix, he sees everything. He saw the Web of Life and Destiny as a puzzle that he needed to unravel, even though he was told he never would. Basically, he is a tactical mind, and he's more focused on the philosophical ramifications of the Web of Life and Destiny more than the actual hunt. For him, the hunt is just a side thing. It's a thing that his family has to do and his father wants. At the end of the day, he's more concerned with researching the web and seeing how it ticks. And while he is a conqueror through and through and sees the Spideys in the multiverse as nothing more than cattle to be led to the slaughter, just like the rest of his family, at the very least, it showcases that among the Inheritors, he's one that's more concerned with analyzing the multiverse rather than trying to conquer it, though he's not against conquering it if it means getting him what he wants, which we will see when we get to the tie-ins. And likewise with Brix and Bora, they're children. They're just two little twins. They're just twins that bicker with each other, but at the same time are as thick as thieves. They have a little contest with each other to see who's getting ahead and killing killing spider totems. They'll bicker if one thinks they're ahead and the other says, no, you're not. They argue, they get on each other's nerves, they'll get each other's nerves, but they're also quick to compliment one another. Going to the Superior Spider-Man tie-ins, when the Spider Army managed to turn Bricks and Bora and Karn against each other. They managed to get... How they did that was by throwing the knives back at the Karn and Bricks, and Bora's like, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to do that. And then when Karn turns on Bora saying, you got in my way, Bricks immediately jumps to her defense and says, don't talk to her, don't you dare strike her again. He's quick to jump to her defense, even, despite all the bickering that the pair do, Bricks is quick to jump to his sister's defense because she's his sister. And likewise, even when they were hunting Cindy and she wound up on Earth 3145, Bricks just went through right to the world, but Bora's like, wait, don't! And then when he starts convulsing from all the radiation, she just pulls him in and is like, don't! It's like, you idiot, that was Earth 3145, the post-thermonuclear war world! We don't go there! Like, yeah, they get on each other's nerves and they'll bicker and complain, but at the end of the day, I find that kind of amusing. And likewise with Deimos, he's just an arrogant jackass, pretty much just enjoying his frivolity throughout the multiverse, seeing the whole hunt as a thing to amuse himself. He basically indulges in gluttony to the nth degree, and he does it because he thinks he'll never have to worry about being a leader. And I think that's what makes him a strong villain. He's very much unlikable. He does not like... And he pretty much just sees the Spidey as nothing more than lambs to be led to the slaughter, much like with the rest of his siblings, but in his way, he sees that as part of the thrill of being able to hunt them and chow down on them. Again, going to his introduction in the Amazing Spider-Man number 7, when we first see him, not counting the flashback, he's feasting off of the inhabitants of Alter Earth because they're all animal totems. They're all sustenance to him. And he's pretty much just thinking, oh my god, I've landed in a smorgasbord. This guy just does what he wants when he wants, and he does not care who gets caught in the crossfire. Admittedly, he does still care about his family and lineage, especially his father when he gets killed, but at the very least, it's a very nice and distinct personality. And likewise, Solus is a big bad motherfucker. He is super strong, and I love how in the instant you see him, he feels imposing, he feels powerful. Like, this is the true patriarch of the Inheritor family. This is the guy that they all bow down to whether they want to or not. And it's ultimately his stance and his will that keeps them going. You can just feel the imposing power. When he actually steps into battle, you can just feel how strong he really is in comparison to the other Inheritors, and especially the other Spider-Man, especially since he makes a grand stand by challenging Cosmic Spider-Man to a duel and winning. But at the same time, that also could be a double-edged sword with him, because again, he kind of went out like a bitch. Yeah, because, yeah, like I said, he got killed by a lucky shot from Kane, so... double-edged sword. But speaking of Kane, let's talk about Karn. See? Kane, Karn, whatever. But bottom line, Karn is also another interesting case with the Inheritors, and kind of going to his role as the Master Weaver at the end of Spider-Verse, he's kind of, considering his backstory, he's essentially one of the few Inheritors who is essentially his world's Spider-Man. Like, I mean, really, think it through. Like with various other Spideys in the multiverse, he lost a loved one because of his own inaction. That tragedy haunts him forever, and he keeps trying to spend the rest of his life trying to make up for the tragedy. It's just that because of his family and how they were conditioned by Solus, he thinks that the only way he can make it up is by just doing what his family says. Even when they throw him out, and say, hunt spider totems, and after a while, maybe we'll let you back in. It still makes it, you can still feel the tragedy. Like I said, kind of going with his demeanor, unlike the other Inheritors, he doesn't hunt Spider-Man because he finds thrill in it. He hunts Spider-Man because he has no choice. The Inheritors feed off of animal totems, and spider totems are what they're told they have to do. And if he wants to get home, then spider totems are going to be what he has to kill, whether he wants to or not. And quite frankly, it's clear he doesn't exactly like it. While he can find while he does kind of have arrogance in his power, especially when the Spideys keep fighting back, and even has his moments where he tries to revel in the villainy, it's clear that for him, he does not want this. He does not want to keep killing these various Spideys. He just wants to go home, which ultimately is what helps get him to the side of the Spider Army, because at the end of the day, he realizes, you guys don't care about me at all. I fought for centuries just to earn a seat back at your table, but you guys just kept throwing me around the multiverse, kept having me kill all these different spider people. Well, you know what? Screw you guys. I'm joining these people. And sure enough, it's what I think is really good in that regard about his character arc. Again, the turn I feel should have been in the main story, But at the very least, it is cool to see him actually trying to put an effort into being good. And yes, I will agree with Hobby. There is still some hesitation you could have with a guy because, again, he's still an inheritor and he still killed a lot of Spideys. But at the very least, it's still not. Very least, his ultimate role as the Master Weaver, I think, is a nice little conclusion. As through it all, through the tragedy, through the heartache, he decides I want this to be how I make amends. And so he officially takes on the role of the Master Weaver, which, yeah, essentially makes him Loom World Spider-Man. And what I like is that when you actually look at him in the role of the Master Weaver, it matches. The mask of the Master Weaver wore is red with like 3 little eye holes in it, and he constantly wears a blue overcoat. So essentially, he's already got the Spidey colors in place, and now with combine that with the Master Weaver's legs, he's essentially his world Spider-Man, but on a more cosmic scale. I think it's kind of cool, and I like how they built up to that with him, showcasing the tragedy, how his relationship with the family would ultimately turn him against them. I like that. Admittedly, I think it still would have been cool if we still got more to his character, as especially in the flashback story, the Master Weaver said, "Oh, you're the one that wants to create, not destroy." I think it would have been better if we had seen more of that throughout the story, as we see little snippets here and there, but nothing really too big. It's mostly, again, he's mostly just talking about how the inheritors are conquerors and all that crap. But at the very least, combine that with the backstory we have with him and then his ultimate fate, I like it. Again, I feel like we could have used more time with him, should have had more time with his development, but overall, it's fine. I like where he wound up by the end, so I think that's cool. As well, on top of that, there are still other aspects of the story that, despite the flaws, I think still really work. While I do hate how the story focuses on killing Spider-Man left and right, there are just as many awesome moments from seeing the Spider-Men in the same room with each other. There are just as many cool, fun little character interactions that I think work out well. When Peter arrives on Earth 13 and realizes one of the assorted Spideys is Gwen Stacy, there's some little tension there. And then likewise, later on when he apologizes to her about it, even she explains, "No, they told me, and I understand. I lost you on my world too." It's nice and cathartic seeing them just kind of chatting. One of my favorite scenes in Spider-Verse is when Billy and Povter, which again, I apologize for accidentally calling Povter Billy at one point in the last video. That's inexcusable. But basically, I love the moment when Billy Braddock and Povter Proppaker actually just talk, and Povter confides in Billy how he feels like he's just a reflection of Peter, that there's so many of they have all these things in common, and it makes him wonder, am I just a carbon copy of him, and am I just expendable? I like that. It's a nice little metaphysical discussion about the philosophical implications of the multiverse, whether any of us are truly who we are or just reflections of someone else, which I always find interesting. But again, I like Billy's response to it, that ultimately you're unique, and yeah, you two might be alternate versions of each other, but who's to say whether he's the one you're reflecting or if you're the one he's reflecting? I like that. I do like that. Of course, on a meta sense, it is true that Peter's the one that Povter reflects on, since you can't have Spider-Man India without the original Spider-Man. But let's not talk about that, because it feels like that stomps out everything that Povter did. So let's just go with what Billy says. I also like, again, the stuff with Uncle Ben being his world Spider-Man, as it does lead to some nice little heartwarming moments where Peter finally can talk to him and so forth. And it does lead, and I do like Uncle Ben pretty much saying, "You know what, fine." And first, just kind of being down in the dumps before after Peter and Otto give him his pep talk, he's like, "Oh yeah, you're right. I can still fight. I can still do good. It's nice. I do think it's really nice, and I do think it's really cool and so forth." I'm trying to think of other individual moments throughout the story. Again, it is cool to see all this again. Oh yes, Leopardin. Hands down, one of the most badass moments in Spider-Verse. Seeing Leopardin swoop in and just start kicking ass. That, hands down, was awesome. And it's another thing that I really do like about the story, the fact that they were willing to bring in all these different Spider-Men. And another little thing I liked about it, again, the clashing between Peter and Otto. The thing with the Superior Spider-Man is that, like I said, he was an arrogant jackass. And while I consider the Superior Spider-Man to be one of my favorite incarnations of the Web-Slinger, even I can't deny that the guy was created through malicious intent. Otto hijacked Peter's body, and yes, well, he may be trying to do the Spider-Man name justice by helping people and saving lives, it's still Otto Octavius up there. He's still an arrogant jerk, and he constantly thinks he's the better hero. At one point in the Superior Spider-Man storyline, it's showcased that Peter's consciousness is still in his mind, and once Otto learns about that, he takes a machine and purges anything that was Peter Parker from him. And yeah, well, they do try and paint Peter in a kind of negative light, as at one point he did try sabotaging a surgery that Otto was doing to save a kid, because that was that surgery would have helped him get the machine, which, yeah, no, I'm not going to be on Peter's side there. That's a dick move, Parker. At the same time, he purged Peter because he didn't want to lose what he had, which, again, I can understand. But you stole a guy's body, Octavius! There's no way I'm going to be all on your side for that. And again, that status quo is God in comics. So at some point Peter is going to come back. It's just at the same time, there's still some kind of catharsis with seeing Peter punch Otto in the face and have Otto continually think, oh, I'm from the future, I'm gonna win in the end, and Peter just having the forethought knowledge saying, yeah, sure you are, good on you. Yeah, that definitely is kind of a thing. That's definitely gonna get on his case. I'm also trying to think, oh yes, another aspect of Spider-Verse that I did also like is Mayday's story arc. Like I said, that while it's not as prominent in the story as other things, it's still an important part of the story. And I do like the arc and how it takes her. Again, it kind of does feel rushed in certain areas and how it proceeds with her, but at the same time, it does still it's still really cool to see the journey that she goes on throughout the story, as how she got pulled into Spider-Verse was through what she thought was the death of all of her family and loved ones, with the only one left that she had being her baby brother. And as such, throughout the story, like I said, she is so determined to see the Inheritors gone, because they took her family from her. They took her father from her. They took her mother from her. They took her freaking boyfriend. And now all she has left is her baby brother. And so basically throughout the story, she is dead set on seeing the Inheritors killed. And the worse things get for her, the more her mental state starts deteriorating. The more angry she gets, the more emotional she gets, to the point where when the Inheritors kidnap her brother because he's the Scion, she immediately just turns on the Spider Army and calls them all fakes, imposters, and so forth. It's honestly very emotional and it's very sad. And while there's a part of me that kind of is wondering, oh, we're not going to see her at her best in this storyline, where it all ends up, I think, is nice. Is by the end, she does ultimately decide to choose justice over vengeance. I do, because at the end of the day, while there's a part of her that wants to end the Inheritors, as in last issue, when she held Solus's crystal in her hand and almost was ready to crush it, again, when she saw Otto kill the Master Weaver and Peter talk about how heroes don't kill, it managed to spark something in her and made her realize this isn't the right way. This won't fix anything. This won't do anything. And so she realized, and so she showed mercy. She clearly still hates the Inheritors, but at this point, she realizes taking them down like this, it's not going to fix anything, and it's not going to make her dad proud if he was still alive. So I do like that. I do like the story with her. It's not as grand as it could be, but I do think it was actually a pretty good arc for her. And while it does kind of feel weird to have her become Spider-Woman, which aesthetically she's no different than she was a Spider-Girl, at the very least, I do think that's really nice in seeing how it goes with her. And by the end, she gets her happy ending, as it turns out her mother and boyfriend are still alive, and while her father doesn't come back this time, we'll get to that when we get to that, at the very least, she now has Uncle Ben with her, and he's ready to just kind of help her out. Be a grandfather to both her and Benji. It's sweet. I like that. I like that. It's nice. And of course, the story still has plenty of kick-ass moments, like I said. It's still cool to see all of these Spider-Men in the same area, and having them all team up as they do. It's awesome. I cannot deny that. It is so awesome, especially when you see some of the new Spideys introduced. I like that we do get to check back in with certain Spideys, and while it annoys me that some are there just to die, I still think it cool to be able to check back in on their stories. While it annoys me that Assassin Spider-Man was off so unceremoniously, at the very least, I do like that we got to check back in with more of his story, especially since his story was a one-shot in What If. And then you get to see him in the spider, when you see, and then of course the scene when Otto and his superior spider army attack Karn when he's going after Cyborg Spider-Man. That's kick-ass. Seeing all these Spideys in the same room and working alongside each other, that's awesome. I can't deny how awesome that is. Seeing all the Spider Army swinging around and doing their own thing, trying to coordinate with one another, it's really cool. I find that awesome. It's got plenty of kick-ass moments throughout the story, like with the stuff with Leopardin and seeing Miles and Drake Bell's Spidey bickering with one another, which, yeah, again, like I said, Miles essentially was the stray man to him in that regard, as every time you tune back in with him, Drake Bell was just rolling with his zaniness while Miles was just going, oh my god, is this my life now? I love that. It's amazing, especially when he has to deal with the antics that are exclusive to Drake Bell's Spidey, because if you haven't seen the Ultimate Spider-Man cartoon, that version of Spider-Man kind of lives in his own world at times, so whatever. But while I think the finale is still rushed, I'm going to call that another problem. I think the finale was rushed. It still had plenty of cool moments when seeing all the Spideys arrive on Loom World and start kicking the asses of the Inheritors. It's really cool. It's really cool, really fun, and by the end when Moreland is just trapped on Earth 3145 and saying that's not fair, it's kind of amusing in some regard. As, yeah, this is the guy that was killing Spideys across the multiverse, and now he is just quivering and afraid, like, no. Like, that's great. And again, the rest of the story, I think, still carries with it the epicness of the battle. While I will admit the Inheritors are OP, that also gives the Spideys chances to outthink them. We see that with Otto when he's trying to fight against Karn. We see that with him when he first builds a weapon that he thinks should reverse the flow of energy with Karn and trap him. It doesn't work, but it's still strategic thinking. But again, he still adapts by turning that weapon and making it into a device that's supposed to hide their presence from the Inheritors. And we see that throughout the story as the Inheritors continue to act smart. Sorry about that. As they pretty much are we see the Spider Army being smart, trying to find ways to outthink the Inheritors in some regards, taking advantage of weaknesses that they don't have that they have and so forth, like with Kane or when Otto led a strategic assault against Deimos when he arrived at his base, or likewise when they lose Cosmic Spider-Man, when they have to adapt and start working around everything to try and get to Earth 3145, or when Spider-Woman is trapped on Loom World and has to use her broken transporter to send the scrolls to the Spider Army. Again, it works in that regard because this showcased that the Spideys don't have to beat the Inheritors on a physical sense, but in a mental sense, because the Inheritors, for all their power, that's all they got going for them. They all have their own advantages, of course. Some have weapons, some have higher intelligence, and some are stronger. But ultimately, they rely too heavily on the fact that they are supposed to be the Inheritors of all reality and let that carry their weight and think that that's enough for them to kind of win the day. And ultimately, it's that arrogance that allows the Spideys to think of strategies to take them down and outmaneuver them. I like that. And we even see that in the finale. We see that with them creating new weapons, gathering more forces, creating strategic attacks. The final scene when that final moment when Miguel and Lady Spider come swooping in with Leopardin, that's awesome, even if it does feel like it's just not necessary, honestly. Seriously, again, it goes back to the whole that issue lacked tension thing. But at the same time, it still feels great to see the Spideys just trying to think strategically about taking down the Inheritors, trying to find new ways of beating them, trying to find ways to work around the weaknesses that they have when fighting against the Inheritors. And by the end, it works out well as they finally manage to get a win, stop the Inheritors' ritual by just taking a piece out of the puzzle. They get Benji away, they send him home, and ultimately, while no one was for killing the Master Weaver, at the very least, by taking him off the board, it meant that the Inheritors can't do what they wanted to, which, again, I'm not saying that killing the Master Weaver was a good thing. Otto clearly only did that because he wanted to try and screw with his fate, because after all, the instant he learned that Peter came back, you can kind of see the seeds planted with him as you see him thinking of ways to try and avoid losing everything, as like the speech he gives to Uncle Ben about how you just have to win one more time, you could very easily showcase is him trying to talk about how I'm going to win this, I just got to get that one win and I'll get everything I want. And then likewise, when he kills the Master Weaver, it's not just him taking a piece off the board so the Inheritors won't be able to do their ritual, it's also him trying to sabotage the web so that it won't lead to him dying. So I do like seeing where that goes. I do like seeing how the story goes. And the epilogue, I think, is fine. I think it's a good epilogue. It just ultimately does what epilogues do. Just sends everyone on their way and just has them all, and just gives them all their endings. We see all the Spideys just waving goodbye, saying farewell, and it does lay down enough plot threads for future stories to build on. Not enough, it still gives a sense of finality for Spider-Verse, but there is more stuff that comes out after this. That whole thing when Otto talked to the Anna Maria hologram and said, okay, like we discussed, and then went to sleep mode, that does pay off later in the books, and I will be talking about later in Spider-Verse when it becomes relevant, or at the very least in a later storyline. We have more stuff. We go that when Silk and Spider-Woman come home, they both go off to go back into their own books separate from Spider-Verse. And then likewise the stuff with Billy Braddock and Anya Corazon, that does get paid off in future books. Then after we finish all the tie-ins, I'm going to be talking about what goes on with them because that is still technically tied to Spider-Verse, and I'll get to that more when I get to that, and I'll even give more details on the incursions and what happened there. But put simply, it still has enough there for future stories to be built on, and overall, while I have my problems with Spider-Verse, I'm not going to claim it's a perfect book. At the end of the day, I still think it's awesome. It's just kind of pure fan service popcorn flicks. There are moments that definitely get my goat at times, like with all the Spideys that are thrown on the sacrificial pyre, and it does annoy. And while the Inheritors can be OP, and I still hate how inclusively the tie-ins are tied to the story, by the very least, it still has so many kick-ass moments scattered throughout. Seeing all the Spider-Men working together, bringing in other Spideys from shows that you didn't see, seeing Spideys interact that you never thought would interact, having little moments like having the little character stuff that they do with Peter and Gwen, Peter and Otto, Billy and Pavter again is still one of my favorites, and just seeing them all working side by side to face this great threat and ultimately fighting against the odds and coming out on top. I think it's still fun. It's a fun story. Admittedly, again, like I said, it still has its fair share of problems, and the finale, I'm not going to deny, the finale is rushed, and I don't care for that, but overall, I think Spider-Verse is a fun storyline. It's just ultimately, it's cool to see all the Spideys brought together, working side by side, facing this great threat together, thinking of ways to outmaneuver and outthink them and outpower them, until by the end, they finally do come out on top with the Inheritors trapped on Earth 3145. And before you wonder, hey, how can they survive on an irradiated Earth? Don't worry, the tie-ins got you covered. They got a bunch of radioactive spiders they can eat. I'm not kidding. But overall, it's still, I think, a fun story. Very grand, very epic, full of kick-ass action, great moments with seeing all the Spideys interacting, a lot of great stuff, a lot of a lot of good character stuff, a lot of awesome moments that made me go, fuck yeah, when I read them. Overall, I think Spider-Verse is just a fun time. And if you haven't read it yet, I do recommend it. Again, there are some things that are going in cautious, and if there's a particular Spider-Man that you're hoping to see in the event, well, brace yourself, that Spidey might end up getting killed. But overall, still an awesome time, and I still highly recommend the story if you haven't read it. So, yeah, that's about it. That we are finished with the Spider-Verse storyline, and since we are done with Edge of Spider-Verse and the lead-in material, I think it's time we get to the tie-ins. As after all, those things still are part of Spider-Verse, and all of them do, and as I've established with these vlogs, they are still closely entwined with what happens in the main story. Well, most of them. Well, either way, so next time we meet, while the Spider-Verse storyline may be over, it's time we head into tie-in country, and for our first foray, we'll be seeing the Spider-Verse tie-ins to Spider-Verse. I'll explain when we get to them, but put simply, I hope you have a good day. I hope that to see you on Tuesday when we look at the Spider-Verse tie-ins to Spider-Verse. Again, I'll explain when we get there. And overall, I hope you enjoy yourself. Have a good day, and take care.